Welcome to the second episode of our Reach Ready series. My name is Karen Brown, and I'm a PI and co-director of the Rocky Mountain Research Evaluation and Commercialization Hub, or REACH. This Reach Ready informational series is going to be releasing videos over the next 2 months, and we're really just talking to the experts and the innovators who have successfully brought their biomedical discoveries from the lab to the market in an effort to kind of demystify the commercialization process for academic researchers in our region. So over the course of this series, we're exploring how commercialization can complement your research, how it can open up new opportunities for impact, and how there is funding and support for this. And by the end of the year, and just in time for the release of our next Rocky Mountain Reach RFA in early January 2025, we hope to show you that commercialization can be a viable and often very rewarding option for academic researchers. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Monica Serban, professor and director of the Montana Biotechnology Center here at the University of Montana. She received her PhD in medicinal chemistry in 2007 from University of Utah under the mentorship of Dr. Glenn Prestwich. During that time, she was part of the Center for Therapeutic Biomaterials, where her work was focused on the synthesis and characterization of novel hyaluronic acid-based biomaterials with therapeutic applications. In fall 2007, she joined Dr. David Kaplan's laboratory at Tufts University as a Ruth L. Kirschenstein postdoctoral fellow. During her tenure at Tufts, her projects were focused on the development of novel silk-based biomaterials. And in 2010, she took her first industry position with Tengion, a development stage regenerative medicine company where her biomaterials expertise was leveraged for the development of novel scaffold systems for the injectable delivery of autologous cells into diseased organs. And then in 2011, Dr. Serban joined Allergan's Medical's product development team, where her role was focused on driving medical device innovation, intellectual portfolio enhancement, and new technology design and development. Prior to joining the University of Montana, Dr. Serban was a lecturer at Tufts University, and Dr. Serban is also a co-investigator on the Rocky Mountain Reach Award. Welcome, Monica. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on because I think that more than a lot of people on our team, you've really kept on beating the drum of, this is an opportunity for researchers in academia to understand what commercialization is, to give them that support that they need, and to really put together this roadmap for researchers to better understand that, we want you to do what you do best, and then we also want to be able to support you. So maybe I'll take a step back and ask you, what first motivated you to pursue commercialization of your research?
Right. So that's a great question. And this goes back to my graduate student years in Dr. Glenn Prestwich's lab. So Glenn is and was a very entrepreneurial person. And so when I joined his lab for my PhD, I was obviously driven by just the scientific curiosity like any other scientist. And at some point, Glenn came to me and said, well, this looks good. Let's have a patent. Let's file provisional patents. So for two of my projects, we filed 2 provisional patents. And then within a short time, those provisional patents got licensed out by 2 different companies. And all of a sudden, I received a $3,000 check as part of my being an inventor on this technology. And so I think that was kind of my aha moment, where I figured out that what I'm actually doing in the lab and my scientific curiosity can be taken further, where not only generates revenue, right? That's always a nice thing, but it can be advanced to the people who need that technology and people who could use and benefit that technology. So I think that's kind of where I was introduced to this entrepreneurial aspect of research. And I really think it's very rewarding to feel that your intellectual creativity can actually help someone. So I hope that answers the question, Karen.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I want to dive into it a little bit more in terms of making that deal or licensing out that technology. Obviously, there was a lot of relationships probably that were developed in that lab, but you've probably taken a lot of that relationship development and understanding who to partner with and how to put teams together. How do you go about finding the right partners or team members when it comes to commercializing your research to get it to that stage?
That's a great question. And I think that the key word here is teamwork, right? So commercialization is a team effort. You cannot do it by yourself. In that case, back then when I was a grad student, the University of Utah had a very strong tech transfer office. And obviously, Glenn, my PhD advisor, had the right connections. But moving to current days, here at the University of Montana, we do have a very friendly technology transfer office that really helps researchers move forward technologies developed in the lab towards commercialization. And that's key because, again, it needs to be understood as a partnership, right? Everybody benefits from this. And again, I'm going to stress this over and over during the conversation. The end goal of commercialization of academic research is not the profit and the money, but it's advancing science and new technologies and new discoveries to the population. It is important also to understand that something cannot be commercialized or will not succeed in commercialization if it does not bring value to the larger scientific community. So it is important to have the big picture in mind. And at the end of the day, the societal impact is what should drive commercialization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And you kind of touched on it here. I think that a lot of people have that misconception that it's all about making more money or kind of getting out of the academic setting. Are there other common misconceptions that you see among your fellow academics or other researchers about commercializing their research?
I feel that a lot of people find, especially colleagues who have not dabbed into this space before, find the whole process intimidating. And that's why I think, highlighting the resources available on our campus, such as Rocky Mountain Reach, the Tech Transfer Office, the Montana Biotechnology Center, the initiatives that are coming out from the School of Business, basically, hopefully will deconvolute and demystify this intimidating aspect of the commercialization process, right? And that's not to say that, if you're a fundamental scientist, you should be doing commercialization. I'm always the proponent of building on your own strengths. If that's who you are, that's who you should be. But in the case that you think your technology is ready to benefit the greater good, right? And to serve patients, there are resources available here on campus where we can, if nothing else, we can just start with a brief chat over a coffee or something and discuss, hey, is this something that could be moved out towards commercialization? And if you as a fundamental scientist don't want to spend your time on it, we are here to help and make this happen and make it easy for you, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll take a second here. And do you want to talk a little bit about what Montana Biotech does?
Right. So what we are trying to do with Montana Biotech is kind of create this Tech Assist Hub, as I named it, where we are here for our colleagues to exactly help with this this demystifying process of the commercialization part of the academic research, right? Again, I feel like there's a lot of resources on campus, but we want to be that hub where you're like, I don't even know where to start. You can just come knock on my door and I will sit down with you and maybe try to figure out together who's the next person to contact and what to do next. As I mentioned before, I always believe that one should build on their own strengths. So I understand that. So what we're trying to do also with biotech is if you're not interested in figuring out if your idea is patentable or not, we can take that further and contact the tech transfer office and work with them to figure out those aspects of your research. Also, we are trying to emphasize the educational component of this entire process, and we're trying to bring in students from the law school who could learn in the process of our assistance how to evaluate patents and figure out if something's patentable or not. We're also bringing in students and faculty from the School of Business, where once something is patented, we would take it over to them and ask them to put together a business plan and also a pitch deck. Again, taking that process off of the inventor's shoulders, right? And have that in a place where we can plug it in our technology portfolio, which will then showcase to strategic partners that would be our responsibility, excuse me, to identify in order to explore strategic partnerships or licensing opportunities. So basically, biotech, again, is trying to make this process as easy as possible for the scientist who wants to stay a scientist and does not want to do anything else. And if at any point a scientist decides that they want to be more involved, we're happy to help with that too. So basically, we will be kind of like this matching network where we're helping you to be as involved or uninvolved as you want while maximizing the potential of your science.
Yeah, I really like that. I do want to go back to kind of your origin story with commercialization too as well. What were the first steps, maybe after your training was completed and you knew that this was a viable option? What were the first steps that you started to take to move your research more towards commercialization?
Right. So the very first step that needs to happen for anything to be commercialized is to have some intellectual property or something valuable, right? Whether it's in the form of trade secrets or IP, you need to have something that's yours and you can claim as being yours. So a first step that every investigator needs to understand is that having a patent does not preclude you from publishing, which we know for academia is a big thing to be able to publish, present at conferences, write grants. There is a strategy to that. So if you feel that whatever project you're working on has potential for commercialization, a first step would be to reach out to us or the tech transfer office directly and see if you have something that needs protection. And in that case, the first step would be to file a provisional patent application. It's a very fast process. It literally can take half an hour, if you plan for it. And so once that provisional patent is in place, you can publish the next day and be okay because now your intellectual property is protected, right? So once you have the IP in place, then it's up to you to decide what you want to do with it. As I mentioned before, you either want to say, hey, I don't want to deal with it anymore, figure out what to do, or you can take that idea and maybe you feel adventurous and you want to start your own company. In that case, we have the Blackstone Launchpad here on campus that could provide assistance with how to start a company. You kind of have to think a little bit more comprehensively. Starting a company is not the difficult part. Keeping the company going after you started it is the difficult part, because then you need to answer the hard questions. Okay, how do you support further research? And at that point, it comes down to money, right? As much as we as scientists don't like to go back for money or gather money, once you have a startup, you need to figure out how to bring in money. And that can be done through mechanisms that are already familiar to academic researchers, such as governmental grants. So for instance, both NIH and NSF have commercialization grants in the form of SBIR or STTR grants, right? So that is an option. However, we know that with grant writing, sometimes the success rates are not where we want them to be. So again, now if you're a company and you have employees, you do need to make sure that you have an adequate stream of money to keep the personnel on board. Venture capitals, angel investors are different strategies to bring in funding, or you have friends or family, whoever can write a check for you. But basically, that's the idea that once a company is started, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Now, taking a step back, once you have an IP, if you don't want to start a company, it is possible for that technology to still advance to market through licensing and strategic partnerships. So for instance, you could have a big company that is interested in that technology and it licenses it out from the university. And in that case, your idea is still being developed towards a product that is going to reach the patient population you targeted. And the university probably can get some royalties, and you as an inventor would get royalties, but then your involvement in that process would be minimum. So just different paths and different alternatives. So there's many options. And again, the idea is there's ways to move your inventions and your technologies towards the market and towards reaching the patients who need it the most.
I'd like to dive into the funding piece, just that securing funding a little bit more. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were making those decisions? Do you write more grants and put that time and effort into it? Or do you start, reaching out and trying to bring on partners in the form of angel or venture capital investors?
So I personally find that to be the hardest part of commercialization, because I don't think there's a one solution fits all, or I don't think there's a scripted recipe for success, right? I think everybody's scenario is different. Everybody's path is different. And so we do have a startup, Mana Discoveries, and with that, we started the company. We were able to secure some initial funds from the 4F funds, and I don't recall exactly who's offering that. I don't know, but it's through the Montana Technology Center and World Trade Center, I believe. And so those funds allowed us to become a business and have an interface for people to know about us. So we were able to build our website just one. We were able to have a logo, have an identity, right? And then, as I said, kind of coming from an academic background, my goal was to write grants. And you find out that when you have a small company, maybe writing grants is not the best strategy, at least not in the sense as that being your only strategy for being funds, right? Later on, we were able to secure a partnership with another company, and that's what keeps us going right now. And we're trying to figure out our next steps, which is not easy. If you reach out to venture capitalist funding options, then you need to understand that you need to give away shares of your company, right? So there's a trade-off. And I don't have all the answers. Maybe if we follow up in a year or two, I'll have a different perspective. But basically, my approach is to knock on as many doors as possible, talk to as many people as possible, hear everybody's stories, lessons learned. And at the end of the day, I think we need to find the path that's right for us. And just as for you out there listening to this recording, you have to carve your own path and your identity and figure out what works best for you or your company. And I think in that context, something that I didn't have when we started our company, Rocky Mountain Reach was not here, right? And so I think the investigators that are involved with Rocky Mountain Reach have that resource available that's going to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put in a plug here because I think that Montana Biotech and Rocky Mountain Reach really can work very cohesively together. You know, on the Rocky Mountain Reach side, we do have this pilot funding, which is more of a proof of concept, phase 0 type funding to get you to that next value inflection point to secure that further funding, whether that be product development or business development activities. We really are dedicated to working with and serving the academic innovators who are interested in commercialization across
Right.
our 4-state region to get that capital infused out and kind of meet that gap that you're saying is one of your biggest barriers that you saw. One more question for you, actually 2 more questions for you, and then I know that we'll have to go here, but I want to continue to elucidate this process of going to commercialization or having work in that sense from an academic researcher standpoint. What would you say are the challenges, or do you find it fairly manageable to balance your academic responsibilities with your entrepreneurial efforts?
It is definitely a challenge just because as a professor at the university, obviously you have a lot of responsibility in terms of teaching, service, and research, right? So I think it's a balancing act, and at least in my perspective, is about following my passion, right? So even though it adds to my time commitments, is something that I'm passionate about. So therefore, I enjoy working on this, right? And I make time for it. It's definitely a balancing act. Um, and, you know, at some point, if it becomes overwhelming in terms of time commitment, I think you have to make the hard decision and figure out what's important for you and kind of reduce the effort on one side versus the other. But it can be done. I am doing it. If I am doing it, everybody can do it. I know other colleagues that are doing it successfully. Glenn, my PhD advisor, is my role model. He was the person who was doing everything in the world, and somehow those 24 hours of the day seemed like 48, and he was able to achieve everything. So it is doable. It's challenging, but it's definitely doable.
Monica, my final question for you is, what advice would you give to a researcher who is kind of at the start of this journey and unsure about whether commercialization is right for them?
So my advice would be to be open to the idea, right? And as I discussed before, it might not be for everybody, but be open to the idea and then understand that this is the path to take your creativity and new technology that you developed and make it available to those who need it the most. So again, there are resources here to make it simple for you as a scientist if you don't want to be heavily involved in the commercialization path, but be open to the idea. I know it can be intimidating, but at least come and have a conversation with us and figure out if it's the right path for you. So I guess that would be my advice. Be open-minded and at least explore the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Monica Serban.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it.